Hello everybody and welcome to All the Mod 7 to the Sky. I hope everyone's having a lovely day. I have quite a few things I have planned for today. More importantly, the first thing I want to actually get set up is a fusion reactor from Mekanism. Just trying to think of the name then. Yeah, this thing is going to be required. Well, it's not strictly required to actually produce antimatter, but it's going to make the power generation for the antimatter production a lot easier. Hence why I'm going to do this before I do the antimatter production. And I'm starting off by firstly building an area for this antimatter production, for the fusion reactor, not antimatter production. I will set that up later. I'm also changing the building palette for the base. Since crafting a lot of this, mainly the basalt bricks and the deep slate tiles, is getting quite a hassle at the moment, so I'm going to switch to something which my ME system can auto craft. So the basalt bricks are being changed to deep slate bricks. What were they? Polished deep slate is now being changed to deep slate tiles for the floor. I'm also using the copy paste gadget from building gadgets. I'm using this to just copy the walls and copy the floor so that I can basically have this completely chunk aligned. Yeah, building stuff could not be easier using this method to actually build things. A lovely room built, completely ready for a fusion reactor and a massive turbine for the fusion reactor. I'm also switching to using these feral flare lanterns to light up the area. Instead of using torches to light up and just making a complete mess, I'm going to be using these. It's lighting up the area nice and evenly, and you won't even know that there are feral flare lanterns underneath here. So this is actually good now. While I'm encoding these patterns, I've noticed that these fusion reactor frames require the polonium pellets, so I actually wouldn't have been able to do this without that fission reactor. Now it's time to build this fusion reactor. I'm going to have it centered in the middle of this chunk, I think. So this is going to be the base of this fusion reactor. Controller has to be in the center. I'm not sure if it has to be on the side or the top. I think it's the top. So this is the fusion reactor. I currently don't have any ports on it. So this is where the fusion reactor ports come into play. These ones are going to be inputs for the fusible materials. So one of these will be tritium, the other one will be... Wait, no. This only needs one input port. No, it doesn't. It does need two. I felt like I was going crazy then. This needs two fusion reactor ports to input the fuel. One of them is tritium and the other one is deuterium. This is also going to need a reactor port for energy output. And this type of fusion reactor, I'm going to be using a turbine with it, so I'm going to need another input and an output. One of them will input steam, the other one will output water. The wrong way around. One will output water, one will output steam. Input water, output steam. Then I also need this laser focus matrix to actually start this fusion reactor. To actually start this, it needs a certain amount of internal heat for the fusion reactor to take place. And to get that heat, I'm going to be using lasers. Now, I will pre-warn you that placing these lasers, because I have wireless charging, it's filling these up with energy. So when I place it, it actually gives a burst of laser. Watch this. The lasers break blocks if they have a block in their path. So you don't want the lasers to ever interact with something other than the tractor beam or the laser focus matrix. Now I'm going to set this to 1,000,000 FE per tick, and I also want this to be controlled with a redstone signal. To actually condense more than one laser beam, you need this laser amplifier. Paired with one of these lasers, and this thing's going to store an internal energy up to 2 billion redstone flux. But when I pull this lever, it will send all of that energy straight into the fusion reactor and will kickstart the fusion. So this basically needs to be a certain threshold so that the fusion can turn on. So I'm just going to leave this. I'm going to leave it like that while I set up the fuel production for this. produce deuterium, you need to electrolyze heavy water. Heavy water is produced with the Mekanism pump along with filter upgrades to actually start collecting heavy water. So this is heavy water production. Now all I need to do is connect this to the AE system along with the electrolyzers. And this is deuterium production. So I'm going to add deuterium to this export bus. This will now send it inside the fusion reactor. That's better. Deuterium is now inside the fusion reactor. That's one of the fuels set up. The next fuel is tritium, which we need lithium for. And to produce the lithium, I am going to be using the Mekanism way instead of what I was currently using, which was the fusion reactor from our chemistry. This produces lithium for the induction matrix, I think is what it's called. So I'm going to need 2 thermal evaporation towers. And the thermal evaporation tower is probably one of the easiest multi-blocks to build. And it's also technically passive because it will work during the day. But I'm going to be heating this up with an electric heater instead of using solar power for this. And the first one, this just needs to import water. The resistive heater is what I'm going to be using to power this thermal evaporation tower. The heat will come out of the resistive heater and then go straight into the thermal evaporation tower. And it's currently producing 8 millibuckets. And to speed this up, I'm going to build the max size of this. The max size of this thermal evaporation tower is actually 18 blocks, going from this bottom layer all the way to the top layer. So now this is going to be slowing down because of the heat. So we need to up how much heat this is producing. This will increase how much brine this produces. The second thermal evaporation tower is going to take in the brine from the first one. And this one, when provided with some heat, will start producing lithium. And this is how you produce lithium. Then all the lithium needs is to be sent through one of these rotary condensators. Condensators. Condensatrators. I don't even know. That's an interesting name. Yeah, in all honesty, producing the lithium isn't actually too difficult. And turning this into the gaseous form of lithium, I can now send this through the solar neutron activator to then produce tritium. Yes, we're trying to make tritium. Okay, so if I sleep, this should start producing tritium, and it also should start sending it straight to the fusion reactor. Yeah, tritium plus deuterium. The only slight downside to using this solar neutron activator is it only produces during the day. So I need to produce enough for it to last overnight in this chemical tank so that the reactor can run basically non-stop. Now where this reactor really shines is when it is paired with the turbine. It produces so much more energy. So that is exactly what I'm going to go and do. I'm going to build another turbine for this fusion reactor. The turbine size for this is going to be the same as the other turbine because it is the max size. So it's going to be an 18 tall by 15 by 15. The turbine rotor is going to be 14 blocks tall, which also means that I'm going to need 28 of these turbine blades to completely fill it. Rotational complex on top of the turbine rotor, electromagnetic coils on top of the rotational complex. Doesn't matter which size, as long as they're touching that rotational complex, it should form the multi-block. Pressure dispersers can be on the same wire level as the rotational complex. Then saturating condensers need to be placed above the pressure dispersers. I'm not going to forget them this time. Then the turbine vents can be placed on the layer of the pressure dispersers and above them. Then the turbine's glass is structural glass, not reactor glass. I'm also not going to make that mistake when I build the first one. The output for this fusion reactor I'm going to send down here, just for the aesthetic of it. This will output steam and then be sent inside this turbine. Each one of these turbine vents, I'm also going to have to run a dedicated fluid line for these, since the amount of steam which is going to be flowing through this is, well, it's quite ridiculous actually. I predict that one of these fusion reactors is going to be able to max out this steam turbine. That's my prediction. Now that is pretty good looking, I have to say. Oops, I think I might have broken something. Oh, that is honestly a lot of these. Well, I still have more to do. Okay, well that's all of the pipes which are running from the turbine to the fusion reactor, sorry, and from the fusion reactor to the turbine. I just need to add all of the outputs for water to these turbine vents, which means that I have to click this like over 100 times. Over 200 times actually, because I have to click these twice. So yeah, this is just going to take a little bit of time. Oh, I have a little bit of motion blur after doing that. My eyes are in a strenuous task connecting all of them fluid pipes together. Well, at least it's done now. This does mean that I'm nearly ready to actually turn this on. I would like to start filling this up just with that sink there. 2 million water, so that should end up filling up this mechanical pipe with water. I'm gonna fill up all of these mechanical pipes with water until they're all filled, because this reactor is going to basically, it's gonna produce an insane amount of steam and require an insane amount of water. This is gonna all be closed loop completely, so I should only need to fill these up once. Right, that makes all of them filled up, so this is now ready to be turned on. Before I can actually turn it on, I need to craft up one of them DT fuel hologram things. One of these, the hologram. You basically need one of these holograms to actually kickstart this fusion reaction. You first need a lot of energy to actually be able to start it. You need a lot of internal heat, but to actually get this started, I'm going to need one of these, and it needs to be full of DT fuel. DT fuel is made with deuterium and tritium in one of the chemical infusers. So I'm just going to leave this here so that if I need to restart the reactor and it stops, I can nice and easily. I can just fill this up with the DT fuel. So this hologram then goes inside of this slot, I believe. I have injection rate set to 2 millibuckets per... I think it's 2 millibuckets split between, so it's 1 millibucket of each. It's not 2 millibuckets of each of them, it's 1 millibucket split, so 1 millibucket of deuterium and tritium. Before I forget, I'm also going to add a flux plug to that turbine. I added a flux plug down here to this fusion reactor so that it can just charge up my induction cube. So it's now set to the generators channel. Right, I think I'm ready to actually turn this on. So this is the internal heat. For fusion to actually take place, there is a certain threshold, but I can turn this laser amplifier on and this will send all of the energy inside the fusion reactor. It's fusing. Look at this thing. Look at how cool this thing is. I figured out why it wasn't working properly. Well, it wasn't working properly because I forgot to remove this. The export buses were taking up the channels and it wasn't able to export. It was deuterium because it was missing a channel. That was the reason why it couldn't inject fuel. I know, it's a silly mistake which I did, but it is working now and it's sustaining a fusion reaction. So this industrial turbine at the moment should be producing about 1 million with 300 millibuckets per tick, and the fusion reactor is going to be producing an extra 100,000 RF per tick, so this is basically 1.2 million RF per tick. but I can easily increase how much this can actually burn. It's currently burning the minimum amount of deuterium and tritium, which is 1 millibucket split between them. And all of this power I'm going to be sending into antimatter production, since that's going to be something which is, it's required to produce this Philosopher's Stone, Philosopher's Fuel. This needs antimatter pellets for Mekanism. I also need to do mystical agriculture for the Insanium. Okay, so long story short, the reactor had a bit of an issue and it's basically leaked a load of nuclear waste underneath the reactor. Now, this doesn't actually spawn any blocks in the world, but it does make it so that the area is radioactive. And the only way that I can actually get there to fix it is I need the mecha suit from Mekanism. The mecha suit is fairly easy now to make, now that I have the polonium. And to actually install the upgrades, I'm going to need one of these modification tables. This will allow me to actually insert upgrades inside the armor. Yeah, so I need to add radiation shielding to every single piece of armor, and then I will actually be immune to the radiation. I'm also going to add one of these dose meters to the mecha suit, along with a Gaia unit. This will allow me to read the radiation currently inside the chunk, and it will also display how much radiation my player has absorbed. So if I accidentally take one of the armor pieces off, I will be able to see how much radiation my player has consumed. Okay, I now have mech suit. You can see the GUI coming from this. It gives you the charge up in the top left. That's for all of the charge in all of the different armors, all of the different types of armor. So helmet, chest plate, leggings, and boots. Also gives you a nice compass, which you have in the bottom left, along with, I've added the Gaia counter plus the disometer, I think is how you pronounce that, which displays how much radiation your player has absorbed. This Gaia counter is going to get very annoying very, very quickly. Keep clicking to me. Okay, so what is wrong with the reactor? Remember that I set up all of these failsafes. I believe that one of them is not working, or maybe two. So currently, I've temporarily disabled it by pulling this lever. This will just trigger the failsafe so that it's in the off state. I know that this is full. I already checked it, and I didn't set the failsafe to read the storage level which is in this waste barrel. So I think I'm going to need to change that so that it's a bit more accurate. It's currently set up so that this one reads excess waste, and if the waste gets too much, it should disable. Although it doesn't seem to be doing anything. Yeah, I don't reckon that these logic adapters are actually working up here, which is weird. Yeah, it started running again. A simple solution to fix this is setting up a level emitter to read the nuclear waste currently stored in that waste barrel. So if it's over 256 buckets, the reactor will turn off. That's not going to happen again. Wow, I look really weird with this mech armor on. I can't take it off though because it will die of radiation, so I'm going to have to keep it on. Right, well now that that is sorted, the reactor is safe again. This will turn on automatically. It is now time for me to actually build the antimatter reactor to start producing antimatter from Mekanism. But before I can actually build that, the antimatter, well, it's actually one of these SPCs, supercritical phase shift. Before I build the supercritical phase shift multi-block, I'm going to need plutonium, which means I'm going to need another machine, one of these isotopic centrifuge. This will produce plutonium. You can hear the noise of the Gaia counter, which is currently in the mecha suit. We're sitting at 24 microsieverts an hour. Yes, this is just plutonium. Nuclear waste, isotropic centrifuge equals plutonium. That should also kick the reactor back on once all of that nuclear waste has been processed through it. Yeah, there you go. Nuclear reactor's on. So that failsafe is now working properly. The fusion reactor is still fusing. Well, these SPS casings took a very long time to craft. Now it's time to build this SPS. Yay! One SPS completely formed. Now this took 8 of the SPS casings to actually build this. The wiki says that it needs 60 of the SPS casings. So yeah, you actually need 20 extra. Now I get to plumb in the cables for this. Now when I say that this is going to require an insane amount of energy, I do mean a ridiculous amount. That's taken 3 million just to charge this. Yeah, so this is it's gonna be ridiculous. This port here is going to be the output. This will output the antimatter into this chemical tank. Now all I need is an ME connection to this. Fuel for this is going to be the polonium, which is currently being produced by that fission reactor. Okay, that's that's running immediately. Look how cool this thing is also. What? Yeah. Compared to the fusion reactor, I think that this one for aesthetics is the bestest one. Yeah, what do you all think? I'm curious on what everyone thinks about that. And I basically just want this running continuously. It's going to produce 1 millibucket of antimatter for every 1 bucket of polonium, so we're going to be running this quite a bit. There we go, antimatter's now in my ME system. I have 15 millibuckets. It's tiny compared to how much I'm going to actually need. And this is also, the SPS, this is also using more energy than I'm currently generating, I think. But I can balance this out since I want to produce enough polonium to keep that running, basically non-stop. So I need to up the burn rate inside this fission reactor because I'm currently losing polonium. Now, in all fairness, that is because I'm also sending nuclear waste to turn into plutonium. I'm actually going to disable that. Let's just throttle this. I'm going to throttle it to 1,000,000 FE per tick, just so that this consumes polonium at a more efficient rate. I'm a bit afraid to up the burn rate on this. Now, what is that going to do if I just double it? It's probably going to turn on and off while it waits for the water to fill up. It's going to need to adjust to how much water it actually consumes. I mean, this is going to be producing double the amount of energy, having double the burn rate. At this point, I hope that all of you have the idea that producing antimatter this way is quite energy consuming and time consuming because it's pretty slow actually. But the moral of the story is if I can produce enough polonium, you know, I can keep up with polonium production, which I am currently. Having this set to 32 millibuckets per tick, I can produce enough polonium. Yeah, if I have the SPS running at the time, because this is on a local server, I can basically just leave this running and it will produce antimatter over time. Hopefully it doesn't make the reactor explode. It shouldn't, but in all fairness it could, and the reactor's had, it's had loads of issues. Anyway, I'm quite pleased with this. And with that, I think this is a good point to wrap up the episode. I've done a lot today, and I've had a super fun time actually making all of these Mekanism machines. More to come in the future. I think next episode, though, I'm going to look into doing mystical agriculture. Because just briefly looking ahead, the Philosopher's Fuel, this requires Insanium and Supremium Furnace, which means that I'm going to need a decent amount of Inferium Essence, which you can get from sieving crushed netherrack. But the way that I'm going to be getting it is through Inferium Seeds. So that's going to be what I'm going to be doing next episode. So stay tuned for that one. Anyway, I hope you have all thoroughly enjoyed watching today's video, and I hope to see you all again some other time.